Welcome to the Hustle Wing podcast. Today we are joined by Peter Bonney, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Vendorful, which is an AI-powered strategic response management platform. Hi there, Peter. How are you doing? Thank you for joining
Thanks.
us.
No, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm quite excited for today's conversation because I think it's the platform really is doing something great in also almost reimagining how we understand upstream procurement and just management and just how essentially we can work with suppliers in a much more easier and effective way. So I'm quite excited for this conversation. Before we get into that,
Mhm.
please by all means tell us more about Vendorful.
Sure. So I'll start with our newest product. So Vendorful's actually been around for a number of years, selling primarily to procurement, but we just launched a product, which is what you were describing there about the AI tool, to help organizations, let's say, deal with procurement. Um, so one of the common ways that large organizations buy stuff is through RFP. And even if they're not buying through RFP, if they're purchasing software, then they're going to ask lengthy questionnaires of their suppliers, for InfoSec compliance. And those questionnaires, whether an RFP or InfoSec, they're just a huge pain. We answer a ton of them, and it takes us hours per per questionnaire, or at least it has historically. So what we've built is a tool to use AI to parse your own content, leverage your own existing content library, past responses you've given, other policy documents, commercial documents, marketing collateral, whatever it is, and answer those questionnaires automatically. So, we've found that it cuts the response time down by about 90%. So instead of for every instead of a 40-hour response, which has been pretty typical for a large RFP, we've been getting it done in more like 3 to 5.
Yeah. Look, I think when I was reading more about the product, there's a
Yeah.
solution that you guys are trying to solve. Walk us through that because I mean I know probably most large organizations, have problems with managing upstream procurement processes
Mhm.
and their supply information. I'm most interested in how that
Yeah.
solving of that problem looks like.
Sure. Well, that actually gets to our kind of longstanding business here. So we founded Vendorful to simplify interactions between buyers and sellers, full stop, on both sides. And on the buyer side, we help organizations get a single pane of glass into their entire supplier relationship. And on the seller side, we help them answer these complex questionnaires that take so much time. On the buyer side, where you're talking about the upstream procurement, um, so much of this gets into to the uniformity of this problem for everybody. Everyone is exchanging Excel files and Word documents all day long, right? And it's because Excel is sort of the least common denominator. It's the format that everyone supports. It's structured enough for most cases, and everyone knows how to use it. But it's a really bad way of tracking critical data. If you are trying to track information about your suppliers, if you are trying to buy a complex product, like, yeah, fine, you can collect that information in Excel. You can manage a big Excel spreadsheet. Um, if you have an ERP system, yeah, you can dump the data out into Excel and kind of play with it in Excel. But ultimately, you're leaving yourself locked into having data just kind of floating on people's emails. You get version control issues, you get collaboration issues, because it's not really a shared format. It kind of is in kind of like the latest versions of Office, but doesn't work that well. And it's not there when you need it, right? Like, how many times does everybody deal with who has the latest version of this file that we're working on together, right? Whether it's an RFP response, whether it's collecting supplier information, whether it's doing performance evaluations. So, everything that we do is about getting all that stuff out of your inbox into a centralized place where everybody can see it. It's all up to date. Everyone can collaborate, buyers, vendors, etc. Um, and everyone has visibility into what's going on.
Mm-hmm. You speak a lot around also just the importance of, having things together
Yes.
in one place and centralizing. It seems that at the core of it, there's a lot of centralizing of data.
Mhm.
Um, what sparked I suppose, the interest in wanting to build, such a platform specifically?
In my prior life, so I used to work as a portfolio manager at a hedge fund for many years. And one of the things I did, I spent most of my kind of the biggest chunk of my career managing a portfolio of metals and mining companies. And those are especially smaller companies. And what those companies are is basically big vehicles, or they're little vehicles, I should say, for raising a bunch of money and then uh, running big, complicated procurement processes. Because, like, it's like they've got like you've got like a map of a mine and maybe a study of the geology, and then you're going to go raise 100, $200 million, and then you're going to spend all that money building the mine. And I just saw over and over again companies really kind of screw that up because it's hard. It's actually hard to pick these critical suppliers and pick these partners that you're going to kind of bet your whole company on. And I just thought there has to be a better way of managing this. There has to be a better way of managing these critical supplier relationships. Instead of sort of winging it like I saw a lot of companies doing.
Yeah, yeah. In an interview, you mentioned that, one of the biggest challenges that you guys have is getting in front of the economic buyer in your target market. Why is that?
Huh. Yeah. So, I mean, as I've learned, when you make a product that is uh, targeted at procurement, procurement is procurement is generally seen as a cost center in organizations, not as a value center, which I think is wrong. Um, because if you think about it, a dollar saved, which is what procurement offers, is better purchasing, cost avoidance, actual hard dollar savings. A dollar saved is a dollar that goes straight down your bottom line. Sales kind of gets all the attention as sort of like being like the real driver of results, but you get a dollar of sales, like depending on what your margins are, you might get anywhere from like 10 cents to 90 cents on your bottom line. Whereas procurement, every dollar of savings delivers 100% down to the bottom line. Um, Despite that, in most organizations, procurement rolls up into some other organization or part of the organization who controls their purse strings. Maybe it's typically going to be finance. They might roll up to the CFO. If they're a manufacturing operation, they might roll up to the head of supply chain. They might roll up to the chief operating officer. In all of those cases, though, there's somebody that is kind of holds the checkbook, whose day-to-day responsibility is not really about procurement and about managing these supplier relationships. And so one of the things, just like candidly, we've struggled with as an organization is kind of it's pretty easy for us to sell people who are in the weeds of procurement and dealing with these supplier relationships the value of like having kind of like a CRM but for the buyer, um, convincing their boss who doesn't really wrestle with those issues is a harder process, and that's been sort of a constant learning process for us.
Mm-hmm. I'm
Does that make
interested.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I'm thinking about the network that we have here at Hustle
Hmm.
Wing, which has diverse, skilled people that might, be able to find some opportunities to help with those kind of issues.
Hmm.
What would you say, is or what kind of skills are you guys looking for at the moment? That any person who's looking to work for you guys might be able to
Yeah.
plug in.
Well, actually, so I had some specific ones. I mean, because those are sort of like the general problems we face as a business. But there's actually some specific challenges that we are dealing with at the moment that I
Sure.
think plug into your network very I don't want to say specifically, but a little more concretely, because it kind of fits with like the vibe of what you're trying to do with people who are sort of looking for, who have specific skills to bring to specific problems. So one of the very very concrete things that we're trying to do right now is really expand our LinkedIn network, and LinkedIn outreach is something that like we've actually worked a little bit with third parties on. Um, and but usually it's kind of like a say like a virtual assistant in the Philippines, kind of someone who's generally skilled, as opposed to like an actual social media person, a LinkedIn person. And the results are so. um, but I've seen that it actually really works if you can actually invest the time. And I never have the time to kind of do personal outreach to the decision makers, the people that we're trying to reach as an audience, and do a better job of speaking to. That it helps a lot. So I actually am looking for someone who's kind of an expert at that, or has experience doing that kind of outreach, who kind of knows their way around LinkedIn and talking to people and making those connections, to kind of do it on my behalf and my company's behalf. That's one thing. Another thing, totally unrelated, completely changing gears completely to a technical thing. Right now, we are looking at beefing up the analytics that we offer to our customers, and we're coming around to the idea of embedding a third-party solution in our application. We haven't selected the third-party solution, but something like Microsoft Power BI, or a competing product. And there's a lot of kind of minutia we're discovering. Like each one of these platforms is a little different. Embedding analytics is its whole thing. So I actually am looking for kind of for like a limited project, somebody who is an expert at embedded analytics or has experience doing embedded analytics. And I'm sure they're out there, because there are a lot of products that do this, and I'm sure people have done it. And we just don't have that expertise in house.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Going back to the product and how it
Yeah.
relates to the landscape, I'm interested in how, or at least your views in terms of, what does the landscape right now look like,
Mm.
and is the product disrupting the space?
So, like, everything in software has changed in the last year. I mean, everything, right? Like, large language models have been around for a little while, more than a year, but everything changed when ChatGPT came on the scene in November of last year, and it was sort of like, oh, this is how we can, people can use these models to interact with computers in a different way. Um, and so it's the same. The same is true for us. Everything we're doing has been completely upended by those capabilities. There are things that we had sort of dreamed about doing for years and didn't really have the corpus of data we thought to build kind of the natural language capacity ourselves. Then all of a sudden, it's available through these third-party systems. So um, all of software is getting a it's like getting a weather alert. Cool. All right. Um, Fun. That was fun. Yeah, I don't know what that was. I guess I'll find out at the end of this podcast. Hopefully, I don't need to vacate the building. So yeah, so everything's getting upended. Uh, I think every big software category is being disrupted right now. We are trying to lead the charge in this kind of interaction between buyers and suppliers on both sides. In our procurement product, we've built an AI chat assistant called Avery, which is not just a Chat GPT clone, but is actually sort of a sophisticated agent that leverages our internal tools to be able to execute complex tasks in a conversational interface. Users don't have to kind of figure out like, oh, do I click here? Do I click there? Just like, hey, I want you to tell me all about, risks related to Acme Widgets Inc. As it relates to, you know, uh, conflict in the Ukraine, and being able to sort of like bring in that web search about like, well, what is conflict in the Ukraine? And like, well, okay, does this company have any exposure to the Ukraine? If it does, which categories? And actually being able to synthesize that information, which is just, that would have been science fiction a couple of years ago, right? So like we're really excited about that sort of capability. And then on the vendor side, being able to parse up your existing content, take all your old RFP responses, reuse them, rephrase them, sort of train a smart assistant to say like, hey, like I'm getting this new RFP. I know how to answer all this stuff because I've seen all the answers we've given in the past. I can produce this proposal for you, and you can review it and edit it as you need. It's like it's completely disrupting the way everyone works.
Yeah. Look, Peter, before I let you go, this is quite an
Yes.
interesting conversation. I'm just thinking about a lot of things. I'm interested in finding out, are there any projects that you guys are currently working on that we should be on the lookout for?
So there, yeah. So the embedded analytics, that's definitely one. The LinkedIn outreach, that's kind of helping us grow that network there. And then we certainly have our in-house large language model expertise and AI expertise, but we're discovering all the time that there are tricks and nuances, particularly around prompt engineering, that are still relevant and probably will be relevant for a long time. So that's kind of another category where we're just really working on tweaking our own internal model and making it better.
Yeah, yeah. Folks that are interested in reaching out and connecting, whether it's social media or website, can you give us those handles and where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can just easily find me on LinkedIn, Peter Bonney, Bonney. Vendorful, also easy to find on LinkedIn. Our Twitter handle is, our X handle is at Vendorful. We're really not active there, to be honest. Vendorful.ai, easiest way to find us on the web. But honestly, the easiest way to find us is LinkedIn.
Cool. Peter, thank you so much for your time. Thoroughly
Thank you.
enjoyed this
Pleasure speaking
conversation.
with you.
Likewise.